things like that. And what happens then it actually raises the testosterone in your body, reduces the cortisol by as much as 20%. And if you do that for about 2 minutes before you go on, what happens is you not only look more confident, but you actually become more confident.
You see, but that's an excellent point. But you see, that involves conscious thought. And therefore, the right way to do it is to hold your breath, get your breathing right, then go into your power posture. Because you tried to do it, I think, but you weren't in the right frame of mind to do it.
It didn't even come into my mind at the time. And you know, I've talked about this in presentations. It was for self-awareness. Look, it was wonderful. And you know, we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So in self-reflection, I'll come out of this a bigger, stronger, and better person. Right now, the wounds are a little bit open, but you do, and we all go through it.
So just to summarise that part of it, the first thing is in your perception. So the first thing you've got to do is to tell yourself, hang on, I don't need to do this. In other words, we all do. One of the reasons that we're all getting more miserable and going on more antidepressants and abusing more alcohol and drugs is because we fill our lives full of illusionary needs and we feel stressed and out of control all the time. Why? Because control is about not being stressed, and stress is about having some form of voluntary input, volitional input. Now, if you're doing everything reflexly, which is, as we said, that's how we're hardwired, we reflexly reduce our anxiety, then you're not going to be in control. Needs, you're going to chase reflexly because they're a survival need. Of course, they're not. They're illusionary. So you tell yourself, do I need to do this or do I want to do it? And 99.9% of cases, you'll say, well, I want to do it. That immediately helps you get in control.
Well, do you know...
Okay, so that's the first thing. Then the next thing is preparation. Do it, be able to do it in your sleep. And of course, that was how they trained junior doctors. In the past, they used to work these terrible rotas, and that all their skills would have to be acquired so they could do it in their sleep, literally, because that's how we would have to function a lot of the time. Secondly, avoid your unnecessary stimulants. Thirdly, be prepared to control your breathing, then have your power postures. So there's all these different things that you can do to help you. And additionally, the mindset, which is telling yourself, I'm doing it because I want to rather than I need to, is also going to extend your life. So what happens is every time you get stressed, you shorten the telomeres at the end of your chromosomes. So those are the little shoelaces at the end of your chromosomes that determine how you're going to live. So every time your cells divide, your telomeres shorten, and that shortens your lifespan. And they've shown, for instance, in a study with carers, that caring for your elderly relatives or your elderly partner shortens your lifespan, unless you have a positive mindset, unless you view it as a challenge, something that you're motivated to do, in which case you can lengthen your lifespan. So a negative mindset shortens your lifespan, a positive mindset lengthens your lifespan.
But it also depends on how big the challenge is, because you can't go overwhelmingly take on the biggest challenge in the world that you're not capable of doing. It's about being in flow. It's about taking a challenge which surpasses what you're doing, which stimulates you to actually want to actually succeed. For example, because that's when it releases noradrenaline into your body, which is that positive stress hormone.
Be realistic. So I think the next thing to do is to talk very quickly about the fact that the internet and friends and life coaches and psychologists will always encourage you to follow your dreams and your fantasies, and they say, well, of course you should do what you want. Of course, this is complete nonsense, because fantasies may be unrealistic. That's why they're called fantasies. Dreams may be unrealistic. So you need a dose of reality checking, and that's self-awareness.
Yeah, but you know something, Theo. I get what you're saying with that, but I think there was a point when I would have agreed with you. I'm not so sure I do these days, because if you don't actually have dreams, if you don't actually have aspirations, you are also restricting yourself from actually achieving things you are capable of achieving. You look at someone like Walt Disney, for example, who created Disney World. Albeit he wasn't alive to see the whole completion of it. That was a dream that he actually had. Had he decided, I'm just going to become an illustrator, that wouldn't be
But
around.
now you're talking about
that wouldn't be
exceptions.
around
My
today.
grandfather smoked 60 cigarettes a day. He lived until 105. But the point is, cigarettes are lethal and they kill you. People do not live until 105. So you're talking about the exception, and those are the dangers. Everyone can cite exceptions, and of course with social media and the internet, they're even more accessible and make people even more unrealistic. Now,
But hold on. So I'm sorry, but there are many people who can still achieve more than actually saying I'm going to settle for this. Because do you know what?
that's motivation.
Because yeah, it is motivation. Do you know what? There was a point on Friday, on Thursday, when I did rehearsal with one of the guys, and he said to me, "Actually, Andy, even though I was all right," he says, "Do you want to read it?" If I'd read it, it would have been a cop-out. Okay, because the thing is, did I actually still have aspirations that I was going to deliver it to the highest standard? Of course I did. But if you start settling for mediocrity, if you start settling for less than mediocrity, that's all you're ever going to achieve. And there's a point where we've got to raise our head above the parapet, come out of our comfort zone a little bit, and do that. It's like when we do weight training. All right, we go and we lift a certain amount of weight, and there's a point where we're going to have to push that weight a little bit harder. We're going to get to a higher weight, because that's the only way we are going to get growth. We are going to get development.
But you said it beautifully. When we weight train, we are realistic. We know what we can and can't do. Now, I might have a dream to be able to bench twice as what I'm doing at the moment, but I can't do it now. And I may never be able to do it, and I accept that. I'm not going to chase my dream endlessly and start injuring myself.
Of course not. But you can
That's
actually
the point.
strive to actually, or you can strive to actually
And
want
that's
to
the
get there.
conversation
But
we
keep
had.
on lifting that weight.
That's a conversation we had a few weeks ago, which is about enjoying the journey. And depending on your individual capabilities and what's realistic for you, you will get either further along the journey or not so far along the journey, which is compatible with you still being happy rather than stressed.
Look, because the thing is, fear does hold you back. Let's face it. And there's a lot of things, because as you talked earlier about the illusionary needs and things like that, we set ourselves up for fear, and the anticipation of fear sometimes is actually worse than the act itself. Let me tell you a quick story. If you actually have you ever been on a plane, Theo?
Yes.
Yes. Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
No.
All right. So there's this point where you're actually on a plane and you're about to jump out, and you're in these line of people, and you're sitting there, and as people are jumping out, you're getting closer and closer and closer to that door. And if you've done it for the first time, you'll usually be attached to somebody who will actually jump out with you. But as you get closer to that door, you're coming to that edge of your comfort zone, where fear starts kicking in. So you'll be standing by that door ready to jump out, and the wind's bustling, and you look down and you think, oh my god, I'm going to die. And you make a decision at that point. You decide, do I jump out or do I go back to where I was? Because if you go back to where you were, that's where you're going to stay in life. If you want to look at it like a metaphor, if you decide to jump out, you are going to go through a transformation where now it becomes your new baseline. And the thing is, the guy who's actually pushing you out is your support. He's like your support mechanism. Because let's face it, when you deal with fear, sometimes you can't deal with it alone.
But that's the difference between being familiar and unfamiliar, and of course that's about learning about yourself. But then you're still going to be realistic or unrealistic about it. So that's okay. For instance, I might never sing because I'm afraid I can't sing. So therefore I have to try.
I've heard you sing. I don't think you should get delusional about it.
Exactly. You see, and that's a beautiful point. If I'd never sung, I would never know. So the example you're giving of a plane is again slightly misleading because you're talking about an extreme example, but you can then apply that to everything in life. In other words, if you don't try, you'll never know. But then get realistic. In other words, you might have a dream. I might have a dream, and I may, if I spend every waking minute of my life learning to sing and trying to improve, I will probably improve, but I'll never become a superstar. Therefore, one of the key things in management is. And one of the skills of management is to be a talent spotter, because everyone can get mediocrely good at stuff, but very few people can get superb at stuff unless they're already good at it, unless they have an aptitude to it. So the skill of a good manager is to spot who's good at what and then get them to focus on it. And I always remember when I was training in psychiatry, my professor did exactly that. he would find out which one of us was good at certain things, and he would then funnel all the cases, all the referrals of that particular issue to that doctor, and then they would become superb at it. And that's a mark of a good manager. For instance, in a work appraisal, a typical work appraisal will go something like this. So tell me, how do you think you did? And the appraisee would go, well, I'm okay at that, I'm okay at that, not quite so good at that, I must admit. Then they'll say, okay, what do you think you need to do? And they'll go, well, that's safe, but I'm not so good at that. Maybe I need to improve more at that. And they'll go, that's right, well done, we'll put you in a course. And of course, a good manager will say, okay, you're not quite so good at that. Maybe we'll give you a bit less of that to do. You're really good at this. Let's put you on a course to get superb at that. That's what you need to do. It's all about being realistic.
Okay, so that's about talent. I want to come back to the dealing with fear, dealing with overwhelm, dealing with anxiety, because
we should say that today's talk is not about anything pathological apart from the phobias. We're talking about everyday situations that all of us face. Remember this. We will talk about clinical anxiety another time, but today is about everyday situations that we all face in everyday life.
Of course we do. And I wanted to go on, because the thing is, one thing you did talk about the other day was about this new minister. Do you want to share about this new minister? Tracy Crouch. Go on. Okay.
Well, this is another issue. What happens is this. She is the Minister of Loneliness. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of Harry Potter, the Minister of Magic, and now we have the Minister of Loneliness. And when I've heard about it, I thought, okay, this is very interesting. And of course, it's come about because of the work that Jo Cox did.
And who was Jo Cox? Just remind the audience.
Jo Cox was the MP who was murdered, but she did some very interesting work on loneliness and found that it was becoming an increasing problem in society. And of course, loneliness is incredibly bad for you because nature worked out millions of years ago that you're much more likely to survive and pass your genes to the next generation if you live in a tribe rather than wandering the plains as a nomad. So we are designed to seek belonging. We need to belong. And if you don't belong, it's bad for you. If you belong, you start producing hormones like oxytocin and you drop your cortisol levels, and it does you mental and physical good. And the opposite is true if you're lonely. And of course, the problem with today's society is one of social disintegration. And of course, what they've done is they've produced it. They've come up with the idea of a minister of loneliness. Now, my own worries about this, of course, is that current democracy, particularly in the West, is all about being a slave to political correctness. So none of the ministers actually do anything they really believe in, and neither do have the power to do so.
So she's screwed before she even starts, then, eh?
Unfortunately, I think it's a pretty safe bet. Now, having said that, we do wish her the very, very best of luck, because she may well be able to come up with some very, very important insights, but I think this is probably the wrong way of doing it. Norway have had the right idea. So they've had a look at their prison system, and they've said, wow, our prison system has failed because we stuffed it full of people who have a problem with drugs. And it's failing, and the same in the UK, the same in America. It's failing miserably. And what they discovered is, since it's failing, let's find out the real problem. And then they looked at research from the past, such as the Vietnam War, where most of the American soldiers were abusing heroin. And when they came back to America, what happened is, after the Vietnam War ended, they discovered that there wasn't a flood of addicts into America, because a lot of the soldiers became socially reintegrated into American society. There are only a few of them who weren't, and those are the ones who ended up having long-term drug problems. So what the Norwegians did is they said, okay, we're going to legalize all drugs, and we're going to socially integrate all the drug addicts. So what they did is that anyone who had a drug problem, they didn't send them to prison, they put them in therapy, and then they said to them, okay, now we're going to send you to work, and they paid their employees the first year salaries. They made it obligatory to employ those people, and they massively reduced the drug problem, and of course sorted out the problem with the prisons. Whereas in the UK, what they've done is they've instructed the prisons to get more efficient, and they produced a minister of loneliness, which really isn't addressing the main issue at all. So that's my own. It's cynical.
Yeah, I just
idea
want to bring it back because the thing is, there's a lot.